Good evening and welcome to Durango City Council regular meeting of February 2nd, 2021. I'm Mayor Dean Brookie and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Amy, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Bettine.
Here.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Present.
Councilor Youssef.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter.
Present.
Mayor Brookie.
Here. Thank you so much. With that, I'd like to have councilors identify any actual or perceived conflicts of interest on any of the items we might be discussing this evening.
Mayor, I want to just suggest that when we get to the point of talking about the lodger's tax, that just to remind the community and anyone listening that my husband is on the Durango Creative District. He receives no monetary compensation for this involvement. I have been through the Board of Ethics to just verify that I may still participate and was deemed appropriate to do so. So I just wanted to confirm that for the public.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder, Councilor Youssef. And hearing no others, we'll move to public participation. Public participation is meant for public comments on specific agenda items that are not otherwise listed as a public hearing. And I might note that the only public hearing we have tonight deals with the lodger's tax, and it is item 9.1.1. So any other items that anybody wishes to speak to is welcome to talk about that during public participation coming up momentarily. To keep the meeting moving along, we're limiting comments to 3 minutes. Our moderator will allow you to enter our conversation. Please use the raise hand function if you're using the Zoom app to indicate that you would like to provide a comment. If you're calling into the meeting using your telephone, press *9 to raise your hand, and our moderator will also acknowledge you and invite you in to provide your comments. Once you're in, you need to *6 to unmute your phone. Our moderator will announce the next person to speak and will ask you to unmute yourself at that time. I would like to also remind everyone to be civil. In this public forum, we encourage everyone to express their views and opinions, but ask that you do so in a respectful manner, free of explicit or derogatory language. To begin, please state your first and last name and whether you live in the city for the record. With that, can we have our first participant, Mitchell?
Yes, Mayor, we do have someone who has raised their hand, and thank you for going over those guidelines. We have changed the rules a little bit. We are no longer asking for addresses. We are only asking if you are a city resident or not. So the first one here on the list is Kirby. Kirby, I have invited you to speak. Please give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you're a city resident. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, hello, Council. This is Kirby McLaurin. I am in the city, Animas View Drive. I'm just sitting here reviewing item 6.8, reference the energy performance contract. And I'm so happy and satisfied with, the hard work that the council has put in, as well as Imogen and other city staff members. I'm glad you're looking at such a big package. It really, it supports the vision of Durango as a leader in the region, working on sustainability issues. So I fully support going forward with a tax-exempt lease purchase agreement, and just want to thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Kirby. And your next, any other participants, Mitchell?
Yes, the next person on the list is Karen. Karen, I've invited you to speak. Please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you're a city resident, and then you have 3 minutes.
Hi there, my name's Karen Pontius, and I live in the city. And I, like Kirby, I want to echo what he said and bring us all back to the days when we used to be able to go in and talk to you guys in person. I remember going in with several environmental groups and, supporting you guys with doing these kind of things. And I'm so glad to see it come to fruition. So keep up the good work. Thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Pontius. Appreciate it. And Mitchell, do we have other participants?
Yes, the next one on the list has labeled themselves as the Powerhouse Science Center. I have invited that person to speak. Please give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you're a city resident, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jeff Souser. I'm not a city resident, but I'm the executive director of the Powerhouse. I'm here today to encourage council to adopt the proposed ballot initiative and to allocate at least 14% of that increased funding to the City Arts and Culture Fund. The potential of sustainable public funding for arts and culture projects would make a meaningful difference in my organization's ability to serve our community. It's the difference between us being a static historic site and transforming ourselves into a natural history museum for 6 months with our current dinosaur exhibition, or opening a summer-long Science of Bikes exhibit this summer on Iron Horse Weekend. It would provide us a path to accomplish what the Powerhouse has struggled to do over our 10-year history: sustain investments in our exhibits and programming, and keep the experience we offer fresh and engaging to a wide range of Durango visitors and residents. 2008, in the midst of a capital campaign to restore the Powerhouse, a past city council pledged to the donors being asked to save and transform this city-owned landmark that they would partner with us by providing ongoing operating support for the new Science Center. That support was almost immediately halted in the midst of the 2008 financial crisis and has never been restored. This proposal gives the city a chance to honor that original commitment without impacting the general fund. On average, public funding accounts for 19.5% of U.S. Science Center's revenues, with local governments providing the largest portion of that funding. If adopted and allocated as currently envisioned, the increase to the lodger's tax would bring public support for the Powerhouse from 0% currently to approximately 5% of our total budget. I urge you to put this question to voters in April and to defer to the consensus on funding allocation that has been negotiated over the past 15 months. We've never been so close to a mutually agreeable path to funding sustainable tourism and arts and culture for our community, and I hope we can seize this moment. The lapse in public support over the past 12 years represents over $200,000 in lost revenue for our organization. A robustly funded arts and culture fund would allow us and our peers to improve the quality of life for Durangoans and make our community a more compelling destination for visitors. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Well spoken. And Mitchell, do we have another participant?
We do. Next person on the list is Laurie. Laurie, please give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, yes, this is Laurie Dixon from Forecor. Forecor for resource efficiency. I'm not a city resident. However, I'm representing Forecor, and I just want to say that the energy performance contracting is a terrific program. And I work extensively with the Colorado Energy Office, and I fully support this program. It's one of the best ways to get a return on your investment for all the energy efficiency upgrades. As you know, that's what we do for both residential and businesses. I also want to say that, as you might not know, but buildings are about 35 to 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And energy efficiency typically is one of the ways that we can quickly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that buildings emit, from their embodied energy, from their HVAC systems, to all the materials that go into buildings. So this is a terrific way to be able to move forward with efficiency and get immediate savings in the tens of thousands of dollars a year. So Forecor fully supports the energy efficiency move to upgrade the buildings through the energy performance contracting.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Thank you so much. And I might also note, as Mitchell noted, that we are no longer asking for addresses, only whether you are a city resident or not. In no way diminishes the impact of your statement or our goal is just to identify those folks that do live within the city and those the folks that might be joining us that from the county or other communities, and in no way diminishes the impact of your statement. So with that careful explanation of our new policy, Mitchell, do we have another participant?
Yes, we do. Next person on the list is Frank. Frank, I've invited you to speak. Can you unmute yourself? Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you're a city resident. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Frank Lockwood. I am a city resident and used to be the executive director of the Durango Area Tourism Office. From literally the day before I became the executive director, I became acquainted with the other 28 tourism offices in Colorado and what they were doing, and realized we were basically, in terms of our lodgers tax, at the very bottom of the barrel of all of our competitors here in Colorado. So this increase in the lodgers tax is a long time coming and very welcome, and I commend both the city councilors for coming to what I think is really a nicely balanced distribution of the lodgers tax fund. For a long time, I really didn't want the lodgers tax to go anywhere but except for tourism marketing or visitor marketing. But I now see, after talking with several of you on the city council, that there are impacts on tourism, and some of those things should be, it just seems fair that they should be paid for out of the lodgers tax fund as well. I also want to commend all of the major stakeholders in coming together. That also has been a long time coming. These are experts in their field. These are people who are in the business and know what this is about and know what other communities in Colorado are doing. And although we don't want to become wholly a tourism economy, I don't think anybody does. I never did. What we do need to acknowledge is that tourism is a really foundational industry in Durango and needs to be kept up and sustained. And I think this proposed bill does that. So I just wanted to commend all of them for coming together on how to divide up the pie, and the city council as well is doing a really nice job in dividing up how the proceeds should be distributed fairly, and especially helping that portion, which I'm really excited about, and that's the creative economy that we have here in Durango. That will only both increase the quality of life for our residents and the attractiveness of our town to visitors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lockwood. And we will have a public hearing on this as well as an administrative action later in the meeting. So we look forward to that. Mitchell, any further participants?
We do have another. Monique, I have invited you to speak. Please give us your first and last name for the record, and if you're a city resident, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Monique DeGiorgio. I am not a city resident. I'm representing Local First and the Local First Foundation. And I did want to provide some comments and support around the lodgers tax, but I do realize that we're going to be speaking about that later. So should I hold off, or would it be okay for me to talk now? Sounds like I should hold off.
I think your comments will be evaluated either way, Monique. So feel free to roll right into it if you like.
I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity to thank you for actually both of these items on the agenda today, the energy performance contract and the consideration of a lodgers tax. I think that all of you are well aware that Local First has spent years of our time and energy working both on the important goals that you, the City Council, have set in terms of local renewable energy and greenhouse gas reductions, and the energy performance contract is a really important, tangible step in the right direction. So thank you for that leadership. And I really wanted to follow up because we're going to, support and engage with you along the way. So this is an important step. And then as it relates to the lodgers tax, I think you're also aware that we spent a couple years helping to found the Durango Creative District. And I really echo Frank's comments about being very excited for both our organization and the community at large to see groups coming together to support not only the tourism industry, but as Frank mentioned, locals. So the Durango Creative District and the creative economy are a really important part of local self-reliance and helping us as a community especially in the shoulder season, the arts and culture, and having a significant contribution from the city of Durango, from the local governments is going to be important, not only for the tourism sector, but also for our artist and cultural community, the nonprofits here that make the city so vibrant. So to just keep in mind that we've all come a long way in that, I think there's going to be benefits not only to tourism, but to the local economy. So thank you so much for your leadership, and I look forward to hopefully you moving forward on both of these items later on in the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Giorgio. Appreciate that. And Mitchell, any further participants?
At this point, no one else has raised their hand, but we do have quite a full attendee list. If you are here to speak during public participation, now is your opportunity. Also, remember, our only public hearing tonight is 9.1.1, and we do have a couple administrative items down in 12.1, 12.2, 12.3. If you're interested in speaking to those items, now would be your opportunity to do so. Mayor, I'm not seeing anybody else raise their hand.
Very good, Mitchell. With that, we'll close public participation for the evening and move on to the next item, which is a proclamation. 5.1 is a proclamation for the National African American History Month. And I will read this proclamation, and I understand we have a couple folks that are in the wings to receive this proclamation. So here we go. The National African American History Month, February 2021. Whereas the City Council and staff of the City of Durango are dedicated to advancing initiatives to institute diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are committed to ensuring all residents have equitable opportunities to lead peaceful, productive, and safe lives. And whereas during National African American History Month, we celebrate many achievements, contributions made by African Americans to our economic, spiritual, cultural, and political development. And whereas Dr. Carter Goodwin Woodson, African American scholar, historian, and son of former slaves, believed that truth could not be denied, and that reason would prevail over prejudice. And whereas on February 1926, Dr. Woodson and the organization he founded, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, first celebrated African American History Week during that week that encompassed the birthdays of both Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. And whereas in 1976, President Gerald R. Ford expanded the celebration to National African American History Month and urged Americans to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. And whereas during National African American History Month, we honor the contributions of African Americans since our country's beginning, and we recommit to reaching for a day when no person is judged by anything but the content of their character. Now, therefore, I, Dean Brookie, Mayor of Durango, Colorado, do hereby proclaim February 2021 as National African American History Month, a time to reflect on the sacrifices made by generations of African Americans in their struggles for freedom and equal opportunity, a time to pay tribute to the countless good-hearted citizens who helped right the wrongs of our past and extend the promise of America to all our people, and a time to celebrate the accomplishments and contributions that African Americans have made to our community and our nation's history. Dean Brookie, Mayor of Durango, Colorado. And Mitchell, can we invite the recipients into our meeting?
James and I, as members of the core team, are here to receive this proclamation. We brought the proclamation as part of the core team ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and in recognition of National African American Heritage Month.
Excellent, Imogen. Thank you so much. Imogen is our sustainability coordinator for the city of Durango as well. And thank you. And James, did you have a few statements?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I'm James Hobby with the Utilities Department, work for the city, and also one of the core team members. And I do have a proclamation that was brought up with the core team. This proclamation was brought forward by the core team as part of our ongoing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and in recognition of National African American Heritage Month. As the city begins to build DEI considerations into everything we do, the core team has been working on to start normalizing conversations around race and equity. The proclamation recognizes and celebrates African American history while drawing attention to persistent inequities and the need for action. And thank you.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Imogen. Appreciate it, and thanks for the work putting this together on behalf of the core team and the City of Durango staff. Very nice. I appreciate it so much. I also want to make an announcement that we have received 3 very well-produced informative videos from the Denver Public Schools and the Black American West Museum in Denver for African American History Month. These short programs will explore the Black American West and specifically Black miners of Colorado, the Tuskegee Airmen of Colorado, and the history of the 5 Points area in Denver. These will be airing on Durango government television over the next 2 weeks at various times. They can be viewed on DGov, on Spectrum Cable channels 191 and 981, or by those who use an over-the-air antenna on channels 10-1 and 10-2. I'll have a repeat of that on Council Connection. If you missed all that, it'll be repeated over the next couple of weeks on DGov. With that, let's move on to item 6, the review of the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to allow City Council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests an item be removed from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item 8. May we have first a reading of the consent agenda?
Certainly. Items 6.1 through 6.3 are approval of minutes. 6.1, the minutes from the January 12th study session. 6.2, the minutes from the January 19th regular meeting. 6.3, the minutes from the January 26th special meeting. Items 6.4 and 6.5 are discussion and possible action items. 6.4 concerns amended resolution R 2021-1 authorizing the April 6, 2021 election to be conducted by mail ballot and authorizing the city manager to execute the La Plata County Election Service Agreement. 6.5 concerns resolution R 2021-2 authorizing an additional appropriation to the Sustainability Program Fund for installation of an electric vehicle fast charging station. Items 6.6 through 6.9 are requests for public hearings with the proposed date of February 16, 2021. 6.6 is to consider the 150 East 33rd Street preliminary minor subdivision and the 3215 East 2nd Avenue preliminary minor subdivision. 6.7 is to consider text amendments to the Land Use and Development Code, specifically to Chapter 3, Lots, Buildings, and Structures, and Chapter 5, Site Design and Natural Resources. 6.8 is to consider an ordinance authorizing execution of a tax-exempt lease purchase agreement in connection with an energy performance contract. 6.9 is to consider an ordinance authorizing the transfer of city-owned land to the Colorado Department of Transportation for purposes of roadway intersection and pedestrian improvements at 1235 Camino del Rio, the River City Hall. And item 6.10 is final approval of Ordinance O 2021-2, amending a portion of Article 1, Chapter 24, Section 24-3, related to reduction of speed in residential neighborhoods and reducing the speed on Animas View Drive.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips, for the reading. And with that, is there any councilors that would like to remove an item on the consent agenda for further discussion this evening? Councilor Baxter.
Thank you, Dean. I'd like to remove items 6.5 and 6.9. And then I was wondering, we'd had a discussion about 6.8. Jose, is that Otherwise, go ahead.
Yes, Council, it is a recommendation for me to pull item 6.8, but I can't pull it myself from Council, so I would ask Council if they would pull it, and I can just give a brief reasoning for it, for the reason that recommendation to pull the item.
And I would go ahead and also pull 6.8.
Very good. Thank you so much. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda less 6.5, 6.8, and 6.9, if there would be a motion in that regard.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Thank you both. May we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Youssef,
Yes.
Councillor Bateen,
Yes.
Councillor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes. So moving on to the removed consent agenda items, item 8, we will consider first 6.5, which was a discussion and possible action concerning the approval of a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation to the sustainability program to fund for installation of an electric vehicle fast charging station. Councilor Member Pro Tem Baxter, I'll let you start with whatever questions you would like to have answered with regard to that.
Thank you, Mayor. So I wanted to say I am very excited about this. Eventually it will be a level 3 charger for us. And if Emma Jean could speak to when that might happen from a level 2 to level 3, that would be great, which is a fast charging for EVs. And then I also, because I think this is the wave of the future is electric vehicles, and getting people to come to Durango to charge up and to spend some time here, I think is great for us, as well as for our residents who would like to get a fast charge on their vehicle of 20 to 25 minutes versus several hours to get them where they need to go. I think it's benefit to both our community members as well as to people visiting. So if Emma Jean had something that she wanted to present and to talk about the timing on that, that would be great. And then I had a couple of questions about what we'll end up charging and our reasoning behind that.
Yeah, I don't have a presentation, but as far as the timing for the installation, we're looking at spring of this year for the construction of the DC fast charger. At first, it will be installed as 2 ports, providing up to 75 kilowatts. And then within a year, ChargePoint, the company who's providing the charging stations, will replace those with 125 kilowatt ports capable of providing up to 125 kilowatts.
That's great. So that means that with the second installation, it'll be a faster charging system?
Yeah, exactly. And even the initial installation will be a fast charge, so much faster than the level 2s that we currently have installed at the Transit Center.
Yes, so that brought up a question which in the documentation that I received after asking a couple of questions, it says 25 minutes would provide 63 miles of range. That's not a very fast charge.
This is based on ChargePoint's data, and this is an average charge. So the assumption is that the average charge will be 63 miles. And so this is based on their back-end data of, I think they have over 100,000 stations installed across the country already, or ports installed across the country. And so this is information that it goes into their modeling as far as what they think the average rate, time of charge, and range for those kilowatt hours provided would be.
So would that be for the Express 250, and would the Express Plus be much faster?
That would be in year 1. I don't have the numbers on me right now for the range for the years after that, but we have a model that kind of assumes that the rate of charge will increase with the installation of the new ports, and also as the vehicles improve and can accept a higher rate of charging as well.
Right. So I'm just hoping if you could provide us with what the Express Plus would end up being able to deliver, that would be great, because it would be nice if we could get up into the 150 to 200 mile range within that 25 minutes.
Yeah, I can follow up with that information.
Okay. The other question I had to do with, at this point, the proposal is to charge 25 cents per kilowatt hour and 20 cents per minute of charging. And thank you very much to you and Kevin for getting the list out. I don't know if the other counselors have seen it, of what's charged around Colorado and Mexico, New Mexico, and other charge point locations. And several of them do not charge the minute charging until after the vehicle is charged, since that's a disincentive to have the vehicle sit there and no one else then can use it. So I'm wondering if we need to do a little bit more work on what our charge rates would actually be. So if it's 28 cents per kilowatt hour, and then after the vehicle's full, 10 minutes later, it starts charging for dwell time, essentially, is how you put it in the document. I would like to suggest that we do take a look at that to see what we're trying to incentivize there or not incentivize.
Yeah, we can absolutely play around with the fee structure. Signing the donation agreement and appropriating the funds to the sustainability fund doesn't tie us to any specific fee structure. And we can definitely look at what other communities are doing, what's been received well, and to maybe talk to the Colorado Energy Office about kind of best practice going forward. Using that financial model. The numbers that were provided in the agenda doc were based on a recommendation from ChargePoint, and that's being used at many of the other corridor charging locations that are being installed through this specific Colorado Energy Office grant program. But that's not fixed at all, just to give an idea.
And if I look at the list of ChargePoint locations, which are 9, 12, 15, 22 of them that are listed on this follow-up email, over half of them don't charge the minute until after the charging is done. So I don't, that just might be something ChargePoint thought was, just what they standardly recommend. And so maybe we need to look at what they're actually charging in other ChargePoint places too. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, and thank you, Imogen. And that's rapidly changing technology as well. I think we, in my sense is that we should take every opportunity to take advantage of installation of a charging station in whatever form. Hopefully there'll be many more in our future, and things like the financial aspect of it is also very fluid. I think that's certainly a topic of further discussion as to whether the city perceives this as a revenue producer, or how, what incentives we utilized as this rolls out is definitely a topic for further discussion. So thank you for those comments. Is there any other comments from council on this particular issue?
Then I would make a motion that we approve 6.5.
6.5, correct.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes. With that, we'll move on to removed agenda item 6.8, which was a request for a public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing execution of a tax-exempt lease purchase agreement in connection with an energy performance contract. I know Mayor Pro Tem Baxter pulled it off, but perhaps we can ask Jose to fill us in on the details. And I note that this is just to, it was just to announce a hearing. This is not the topic of discussion of the content of that energy performance contract. But the concern was that we needed further discussion. Jose, go right ahead.
Yes, Mayor and Council, thank you very much, and appreciate the opportunity. Absolutely, it is a great project and something with our sustainability efforts that we want to continue to go through. Imogen has done an amazing job in continuing to push this through. We just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to take a look at maybe some other financing options that may be available for us, maybe that where we can do it ourselves. So we would have asking for a little bit more time for us to kind of review and do a little bit more homework on our financial options that we may have for the council to consider. And then also, as we are looking at a city facility subcommittee that was formed by the council to talk and discuss just a little bit before we kind of decide what buildings that we place in. If we were to go with this process, it's about a 17-year payoff. And if there's some buildings that we may not be looking at utilizing for that full 17 years, it's a good time just to, before we commit ourselves, to make sure that we are putting it on buildings and doing the upgrades on things that we see will be here for the long term to be able to reap the reward. So this isn't saying that we're not going to do this project. We absolutely are. We're just looking for a little bit more time for staff to analyze it. And we were just a little bit ahead of the gun, but that's okay. We'll come back and have a good recommendation for the council when it's ready to go.
Thank you, Jose. I have one question, which is, given that this was just placing that item on the agenda for February 16th meeting, it's also, in your opinion, not enough time over that 2-week period to obtain that data and come to consensus that you'd rather delay it for another couple of weeks or so to gather that data?
Yes, sir. It would give me enough time to do the financial analysis as well as meet with the mayor and mayor pro tem on that facility subcommittee to have that first talk, because I think we have that next week. So it just gives me enough time to really kind of look into it a little bit more, gain consensus from the council, and get ready to go. But it still is our intention to move forward with these improvements. It may be a little bit different, or it may be with the lease purchase. We just still have to have some time to take a look at it a little bit harder. And so I do appreciate the council with their consideration of pulling this item. But for those that had spoken in favor of it, it is something, again, that we are still going to do. We are still going to move forward. It's just really the mechanisms and the mechanics behind it to make sure that we get that correct.
Thank you, Jose. Is there any other questions of council on this particular topic? If not, I would entertain a motion to delete this item from the agenda and to be replaced at a further during a further council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please, Amy?
Councillor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councillor Youssef?
Yes.
Councillor Bateen?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes, thank you so much. And with that, we'll move on to deleted item 6.9. Did I hear that correctly? I just want to check that before I read it. 6.9 is a request for public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing the transfer of city-owned land to the Colorado Department of Transportation for purposes of a roadway intersection and pedestrian improvements at 1235 Camino del Rio. That's near River City Hall.
So my question about that is, I was just wondering if this might have any impact should the city decide to do a Camino crossing in that area, either above ground or underground or whatever that looks like. If we'll have if there be any complications because of this, or some benefit because of this, or what have you. That was my concern.
I'm happy to speak to that. Kevin Hall, Assistant City Manager, Mayor Pro Tem Baxter. While we don't have any design on a Camino underpass at this point, and I think we heard earlier today that there is work moving in that direction this year, the improvements CDOT is proposing relate to the improvements they shared with us last week in study session. What we have here is essentially just a knocking down of that driveway and improvements on the curb ramp, particularly on the northwest corner of that intersection. As you heard last week, there's also going to be the interim improvements for the hawk signal there, and whether an underpass, if it comes to be, occurs in that location, the improvements that are going in right now are, I guess, relatively minor. I would say it's mostly sidewalk work that CDOT is proposing. I did ask the engineering division to review the proposed plans in relation to impact on the River City Hall property. There was not an analysis of what an underpass impact might be. My suspicion would be that if an underpass is proposed and designed in that location, the entire stretch of road cross-section will be upgraded as part of an underpass. If you recall, when we did the Main Avenue underpass, the cross section of the highway had to be replaced in order to do that. So CDOT is asking for a little over 900 square feet. In order for us to transfer any land to CDOT, we need to have an ordinance in place to do so. The intent was to hold the public hearing in 2 weeks with the details related to what they're proposing. Certainly that would give us some time here for me to have some conversations with other city staff regarding any plans we've already done, because we've done a lot of preliminary analysis on crossings. We could certainly tighten that up and get that information for you prior or as part of the agenda packet for the 16th.
That would be great. I just wanted to kind of make sure that there weren't any legal or physical issues that this might cause. Thank you.
Any other questions of council regarding this issue? I'm reminded that this is the request for public hearing, not the public hearing. And so if we can, with the suggestion that Kevin has brought forward in terms of providing us with details during that public hearing, look for a motion to get this back on the agenda for the 16th of February so that we can entertain a lot of the fruitful discussion around this particular topic.
So moved.
It's been moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. Maybe we have a roll call, please, Ms. Phillips.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes, thank you so much. That moves us into our item 9, public hearings. The City Council previously directed staff to publish notice of these public hearings for each hearing listed below with the following proposed ordinance or topics that have been set for public hearing at this meeting. These issues dealt with within this section of the agenda are of legislative or policy in nature. This is a virtual meeting. The procedure for public hearings has been adjusted. So to contribute to a public hearing, please do the raise hand function as you did in public participation, and you will be invited in to participate. This is a public hearing on ordinance of the City of Durango, Colorado, amending Article 4 of Chapter 23 of the Code of Ordinances regarding the imposition, collection, and administration of the lodger's tax and declaring an effective date. Maybe we start with the staff report, please.
Yes, Mayor, good evening, members of council. I will give a brief overview of this topic. There are 2 items on the agenda tonight, as you know, related to the lodger's tax. This one is the ordinance that will amend code provisions that primarily deal with collection, imposition, and administration of the tax. The other item, which is actually later on the agenda, will be the resolution, which puts the ballot question on the ballot for the electors at the April 6th election. So this item is just to point out is for a hearing. I have provided a draft of an ordinance to assist in kind of taking a look at what an ordinance might look like. The action tonight would be to prepare a final ordinance to bring back for first reading at the next meeting on the 16th. At this point, I also wanted to point out something that I didn't actually, I think, put in the agenda doc to be clear, that this ordinance as drafted would be effective on June 1st of this year, which is the proposed effective date of the lodger's tax, but it would only be implemented, that is, the ordinance would only be implemented if the lodger's tax would approve. So the effect of that is that the existing provisions in the code would remain in force in the event the lodger's tax were to fail at the election. So in other words, it would not impact the current lodger's tax at all. It would remain in effect. And I've had a couple of people ask me about that, so I want to make sure that that's clear. So moving through the provisions of the ordinance as drafted, and again, this is an opportunity for council to give input. on any of these items as this ordinance moves forward. Again, there are provisions in the code now that implement the existing 2% lodger's tax. I have put together a list of the most significant changes in the proposed amendment to the ordinance. Of course, the rate of the tax would be increased to 5.25, assuming council approves that item later in the agenda for the resolution. And the uses of the revenues are also specified per that ballot language in the code. So the expenditures of the funds would be made in accordance with actions of council, either through a annual budget adoption or by adoption of a resolution by city council detailing the purposes and the extent of the expenditures. That's essentially the same language. That's very similar to the existing language, but it makes it clear the council will take action at least on an annual basis to determine exactly how the expenditures will be made. And that involved in that would be, again, entering contracts with entities or making specific provisions for the distribution of those funds to particular entities or for the expenditures directly by the city, however council wants to do that. Perhaps the biggest update is in the definition of taxable premises or taxable properties. When the current code was adopted, the concept of vacation rentals and similar temporary uses of residential properties was not really thought of. So at this point, the types of lodging have been expanded to clarify temporary lodging of all kinds. That is anything less than 30 days, which that's the current cutoff in the code as well as the 30 days. But it includes hotels, motels, motor hotels, lodges, bed and breakfast, multifamily unit, single family residence, RV park, or any other real estate used as a vacation rental or is it otherwise used for temporary lodging of any type. So that really is intended to cover what we typically refer to as a vacation rental, or any other temporary use of a part of a residence as a temporary lodging. Also to point out that the language regarding an RV park has been added here. That discussion, that item came up as discussion early on during study sessions. So I want to specifically point out that this language would include a typical RV park. There aren't any RV parks in the city at this point, I'm told, but it's possible that one could be annexed. There are two that are very close to the border of the city. Or I suppose it's possible, even though unlikely, that a new one could be constructed in the city. But if that were to occur, again, these provisions would apply to temporary rental of spaces for RVs or other camping. And then the penalty provisions in the code have just been updated to make them consistent with all of the other general penalties currently in the code. So items that remain essentially unchanged. So again, there was a list of things that have been changed, the main items. So the items that will remain unchanged in the code will be, there's a requirement that the funds be deposited into a special fund to be used for the designated purposes. The exemptions from the tax, including occupancy by nonprofit entities, governmental entities, for hospitals, medical clinics, or for occupancy longer than 30 days. Again, those are consistent with the current code. Licensing, collection, and reporting requirements of the folks who are running the establishment subject to the tax. And then the existing code calls for the retention of 2% of the gross revenues by the city to offset costs of collection and administration. Again, that provision is unchanged. I know that there has been a question raised about that, whether it should apply to all of the tax or not. That may be a topic of discussion, but as drafted, that provision remains unchanged. So I'll bring this up again when we get to the resolution, but in consultation with the finance department and with other staff, the Tabor question requires that the city estimate the revenues to be raised from the new tax during 2021. And some assumptions were made that based on approximately a 12.5% reduction in collections, since it'll be imposed in June 1, that'll be 7 months collection. So the estimate is approximately $900,000 under those assumptions would be collected during 2021. I think I would point out that it's necessary to be conservative about that, and conservative in the sense that you want to put in a number that reflects the possible collections, because if you estimate too low, it creates issues under the Tabor approval. So the number that's actually collected, I think by sort of estimates, maybe less than that, and I want to point that out. But this is sort of the outside or on the high side of what staff believes may be collected. So I think that sort of concludes the information that I had in the agenda doc. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Dirk, I was wondering if it might be salient to recap the percentages for the following purposes.
Yes, absolutely. And again, this language is shown up in the resolution. It will be adopted to put the question on the ballot. But the breakdown that council determined at the study session, or excuse me, I guess it was actually a special meeting earlier, was that 55% would be of the total revenue from the tax. 55% would be for sustainable tourism marketing, including advertising and attracting conferences, conventions, and meetings. 20% for transportation and transit services, equipment, and facilities. 15% for arts and cultural events, programs, and facilities, and 11% for any of the above purposes or for other purposes related to the impacts of tourism as council may determine.
Excellent. Well, that's kind of the salient numbers that we as Dirk said, talked about in our last meeting, and we can have further discussion about that. Is there any other questions immediately here for Dirk or staff before I open a public hearing on this matter? Seeing none, let's open a public meeting. I'll get out the virtual gavel here and open the public hearing. And with that, either by Zoom, just do the raise hand function, or if you're calling in by phone, do *9 and you will be received by our moderator. And Mitchell, do we have any participants?
Yes, Mayor, we have quite a few who have raised their hand already. The first one on the list is Rachel. Rachel, please give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident. You have 3 minutes.
Hello all, this is Rachel Brown, Executive Director of Visit Durango, and I am a county resident. Good evening, Mayor Brookie and councilors. Thank you for fast tracking this issue to make it on April's ballot. This increase has almost made it on the ballot many times over the last several decades, and I think we have all agreed it's long overdue and the time is now. For your reference, all of the major organizations and associations in town are in support of this increase to 5.25%, with at least 55% of that going towards sustainable tourism marketing. The organizations that have endorsed the measure represent the vast majority of our businesses in town and include the Durango Chamber of Commerce, whose board of directors voted in unanimous support of this, the Durango chapter of the Colorado Restaurant Association, the Business Improvement District, and Local First, and of course, the Durango Area Hospitality and Lodgers Association, DALA, the Durango Creative District, the Creative Economy Commission, and Visit Durango. Additionally, in our last resident sentiment survey, a majority of locals said they would vote yes for a lodgers tax increase. Council has rallied behind this cause, the stakeholders are in support, and the residents get it. Now let's get it done. That is all. Thanks for your support.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for your support. And Mitchell, do we have another participant?
The next person on the list is Ellen. Ellen, it is your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident. And you have 3 minutes.
Hi there. Thank you, Ellen Stein. I am a city resident. I want to bring us back to the city council goals that start with advancing initiatives to institute diversity, equity, and inclusion with the city, within the city, enhancing our quality of life and sense of place, addressing Durango's affordable housing, and supporting and providing resources for mobility, accessibility, transit, aviation, and transportation. I'm a member of the Multimodal Advisory Board, though I am not speaking on their behalf tonight. I'm in support of the increase of the lodger's tax, and I want to advocate that for the current needs of transit, which hit a fiscal cliff in 2023, and that without this lodger's tax and some portion of it going to transit would leave us with hundreds of thousands of dollars of deficit. We, with the support of our excellent staff at the city, have just re-implemented the route to Mercy. That is so critical, especially with the pandemic that was cut back in 2018 when we started to feel the cuts that the state started to implement. And I want to advocate for 2.25% of the 5.25% proposed lodger's tax to go to transit. That will avoid hundreds of thousands of dollars that we will see and not allow us to increase the routes to transit and or at all maintain the reinstatement of the transit route to Mercy. I want to also bring our attention to the article in the Herald this weekend about the need for workforce housing. People in essential jobs that support our tourism industry, service workers that average in the $20,000 range. Who is this increase for? I love our creative economy. I've advocated for it. But I would suggest, as this article states, many Durangoans don't want the city to turn into a tourism-focused mountain resort town. They want it to be a place where people can live, work, raise a family, and start a business and retire. So we need to support essential services, starting with transit. We need to work on workforce housing. And we need to be asking, who is this to benefit? So I thank you for your consideration and working to preserve our quality of life, but please take a look back at your council goals and this has to have an end date. This can't be an open-ended fund. All of the other city sales taxes have to have an end date. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen Stein. We're right at the limit there. So thank you so much for being concise and appreciate that. And I believe, we'll take another comment and have some things to talk about. First, Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Baxter.
Thank you. Melissa said she got kicked off and she's trying to get back in. Do you see her?
I don't see her yet, but
I do not see her in the attendee list, but I will keep an eye out.
Thank you.
Very good.
The next person on the list for this public hearing is Tim. Tim, it's your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you're a city resident. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, Council. I'm Tim Walsworth. I am not a city resident, but I do run the Durango Business Improvement District. I want to thank you guys for taking this issue on. Our community has had the same lodger's tax rate since the 80s, as I understand. And I appreciate you guys for bringing it to this point. And on behalf of BID, I just wanted to say to the council and on the record that the BID is in support of an increase in lodger's tax, as you guys have proposed. And we're very supportive of Visit Durango, the group who currently does the marketing for our town, and we hope will always do it. We're very supportive of them receiving at least 55% of the funds. Thank you guys again for letting me speak and for your efforts.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you for your comments and help in this regard. Any further participants, Mitchell?
Yes, the next one is David. David, it's your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident, and you have 3 minutes.
Great. Can you hear me? Awesome. David Moeller, and I live at 72 Trestle Lane here in Durango. I own 2 businesses in Durango, both directly related to tourism. I sit on the board of directors for the Business Improvement District, and I'm the current chair of Visit Durango. I come to you tonight, though, as the business owner of the outdoor recreation sector. Thank you for your time and consideration with the proposed lodgers tax increase. Over the past several months, during the discussions around lodgers tax and tourism, there's been many discussions and comments made. For starters, I'd like to state that I am in support of the lodgers tax increase to support the marketing efforts for Durango, specifically Visit Durango's efforts to market our town. Tourism is the low-hanging fruit that our town needs to recover from the economic impacts that we have seen due to COVID, 416 and beyond. Tourism is rooted within our community and is here to stay with the support of the appropriate marketing. It would be nice to see more manufacturing jobs, medical fields, so I would encourage council to keep looking for ways to support those industries so they can see Durango as a place to call their future business home. The increase in lodgers tax would allow Durango to compete against other communities like ours in our highly competitive market to attract visitors. You have to build it before they come. I can tell you from my personal advertising spend, if I stopped advertising and marketing, guests just simply would not come. If you believe in the economic multiplier is the number of times that a dollar is spent within a community before being spent outside of that area. The Colorado Tourism Board uses a 2.56 economic multiplier. Rafting alone in 2020 saw 33,000 visitors at $137 per person, had a $4.5 million direct impact within our community. Using the economic multiplier, that was 11.6 million. Environmentally speaking, rafting down the river has a very low impact. Outdoor recreation in Colorado makes up for 229,000 jobs, 9.7 billion in wages, along with 28 billion in consumer spending and 2 billion in local tax revenues across the state. Our bus drivers make $20 per hour. Guides can make more than that. These are good jobs. My 30+ employees spend their paychecks in town. I cannot see a way if that tourism spend is not connected with every sector within our town. We are also looking to hire an additional 20 more team members this year. These are not low-paying jobs. The issue is not having a full season. Council could work with seasonal employers to allow our citizens, friends, and neighbors a way to connect to seasonal businesses so that they are considered year-round. This would pave the way for the opportunity for them to build credit, buy a car or home. If you want to attack affordable housing, then hit it from multiple ways, because developing costs continue to go up. I have doubled down on tourism and purchased another rafting company within our community because I see the potential that our area has on sustainable tourism. But our industry cannot do it alone. I urge you to vote in support of the lodgers tax and support our economy 2.56 times. A vote to support for tourism supports your citizens, their opportunities, and how much they can afford to spend, and more importantly, the opportunity to live in our amazing community. 55% for marketing or more. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And thanks for being concise. Other participants, Mitchell?
Yes, the next one on the list is Brenda. Brenda, it's your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Brenda Macon, and I am a Durango resident. I'm also the executive director of the Durango Art Center, a 55-year-old nonprofit that is a keystone of the Durango community. I serve on the board of directors for the Durango Creative District as well. I'm joined this evening by several staff and board members from the DAC who stand in support of the proposed lodgers tax increase to 5.25%, with at least 14% of the increase to go to the City Arts and Culture Fund. It has been since the financial crisis of 2008 that the city of Durango stood with the local arts and cultural nonprofits who bring so much to the community, and we are so excited to see the potential for an authentic collaboration and this funding mechanism to create a sustainable resource for the organizations who create the events and festivals that provide vibrancy and culture to both tourists and locals alike. The Durango Art Center serves 1,400 children through arts and theater education. It brings the region's largest arts festival to Durango each fall, now for 27 years running, and it has a vibrant theater that hosts over 140 community events during a regular year. We've stayed alive during the pandemic, but have received a large cut to our earned revenue, and this funding mechanism will be a crucial component of sustainability moving forward. We truly appreciate the council's work on this important issue and echo the sentiments presented by Jeff Souser at the Powerhouse and others that this will be a welcome and timely initiative by our community. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ms. Macon. That's awesome. Thanks so much. And with that, we'll move on to another participant.
Next one on the list is Dave. Dave, it is your turn. Please give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, City Council. My name is Dave Rathbun. I live at 246 Hay Barn. I am not sure up in Edgemont if we're in the city limits or not. I suspect we're not,
but I am responsible for Mountain Capital Partners businesses in Colorado, which include Purgatory Resort, Hesperus, Purgatory Snowcat Adventures, and Motel Durango downtown. We are in support of seeing the lodger's tax increase. Again, it's been far too long for an adjustment to be made. We believe that having tourism resources available can help not only large operators like ourselves, but also the smaller operators that don't have the resources like a big outfit like ours has. I will bring up some history that I have, being not only on Visit Durango, but I have worked for other large DMOs in other locations around the country, including Bend, Oregon. And I would just like to remind everybody that the effort that we're putting forth is to provide sustainable tourism. That's about making sure we take full account of the current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts while we address the needs of all stakeholders, not just visitors, not just the tourism industry, not just the environment, but also the host community and our host government. So we need to keep all of these ideas and all of these entities in mind when we think about what we want. One of the things that I believe and think that history has shown is that desirable locations will continue to survive downturns, and they're going to continue to thrive when times are good. I believe Durango is such a place, and that we can grow together and be responsible together and tick off a lot of the goals that we have as a community. I do believe we need to be smart about setting very clear and concise details so that anything that we're going to do with any element of the tax increase is well thought through, and that it's not fly by the seat of your pants. We learned that in Bend, Oregon. A lot of rules were not completely figured out, and it cost big time. And they actually got sued. The city got sued by members of the tourism committee because some of the details weren't figured out when the tax increase was passed. So that's my request and my suggestion is that we get it right the first time, and we can all benefit. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your effort as a city council to look at this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rathman. Appreciate that. And hopefully the time it's taken, we will get this right. So with that, another comment, Mitchell.
Yes, Mayor. The next person on the list is Harrison. Harrison, it's your turn. Please give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Harrison Went. I am a city resident. I just want to come on here and say that I am in support of the lodger's tax, but not in its current form. I think that giving 55% to marketing and particularly Visit Durango is absurd. After their marketing strategy, which included racism, ableism, transphobia, ageism, and classism as their basic guide, I don't know that we should choose them as our, or give them 55% of this lodger's tax. I'm in support of Ellen's, what she said about 2.25%. Going towards transportation. I think that Durango residents need to come first and foremost always. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt. And Mitchell, do we have another participant?
The next one on the list is Dave. Dave, it's your turn. Please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you're a city resident. And you have 3 minutes.
Hi there, Dave Woodruff. I am indeed a city resident. I am the current Durango chapter president of the Colorado Restaurant Association. My board approved me speaking on behalf of the organization in support of Resolution R 2021. We support the utilization of the 55% to be utilized directly for the marketing services for the city of Durango. As Tim from the bid stated, as well as Dave from Purgatory, the lodger's tax hasn't been changed since the 80s, and we appreciate you taking this complex issue head on. As an industry that will directly benefit from a sustainable tourism approach to getting individuals, families, and couples to Durango, we support this resolution. Furthermore, as an industry that has been greatly impacted by capacity restrictions from the pandemic, we will need the short and long-term supports that tourism will bring to Durango. Durango is a resilient community, and this will give us the opportunity to bounce back and build up the city and its independent businesses in 2021 and into 2022. Thank you for your time in this important matter. We appreciate you lending an ear to our community.
Thank you, Mr. Woodruff. Appreciate those comments. And our next participant, Mitchell.
Nobody else has raised their hand. If you are here to speak about the possible lodger's tax increase during the public hearing, now is your opportunity.
While we're waiting, also, I might just mention the previous comments from Mr. Frank Lockwood and Monique DeGiorgio that were pertinent, that were discussed during the public participation period that are germane to this particular issue as well and should be considered for this topic. And do we have any others right now?
Mayor, nobody else has raised their hand.
Thank you, Mitchell. With that, we'll close the public participation and return to discussion amongst council and opposed action. So do we have any other questions of our city attorney relative to the content of the proposed resolution as written?
I just wanted to confirm that as written, the proposal does not guarantee any revenue to any particular named entity. I believe that it's a general, and that would be decided later by council who might be managing those dollars and how they might be distributed.
I believe that perhaps Dirk can speak to that, but obviously the amounts is never fully predictable, as in the case of this year's pandemic, in terms of collection of this tax and any guaranteed amount of money. But were you speaking relative to deviation from the percentages that are outlined in the resolution?
No, I was speaking to the public comment that was made about the funding that would be going to the Powerhouse if this were passed. And I just wanted to clear up if there is a misconception, that is not stated directly in the tax ordinance.
Good point.
And that funding also isn't a guarantee that the contractors would visit Durango or any other entity. It's a city council decision.
Right.
And to confirm,
go ahead, Melissa.
That city council decision, would that be made? That decision is made after the election.
Yes.
Made during the budget cycle.
Well, I think this year in 21, because you would be beginning mid-year, again, the taxes as proposed would begin on June 1 because of the delay in collection and filing and so forth. There would be at least a 45 to 60 day time period, and sort of to have funds begin to be reported and paid to the city. So I think in the way the language is drafted is the council would have to take action by resolution to distribute those funds. So if the council wanted to distribute some of those funds during 21, then you would need to take you need to take action to determine how you want to distribute those within the categories. So I think I think everyone understands that the categories as specified would be fixed. The recipients within those categories would be something that the council would have to take specific action on. I think it's up to council as to whether you wanted to await and accumulate funds and put those in with the 22 budget, or whether you would want to take action during 21 to begin those distributions. Again, that's entirely up to council at that point. So hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Dirk. Any other questions? Councilor Noseworthy.
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to propose an alternative proposal. I know I may sound like a broken record, so I appreciate your letting me at least present something. We've known since 2018 that we were going to face a cliff with our transit, but it hasn't really, for whatever reason, risen to the level of a drumbeat. But I think the reality is in 2023, we lose 49% of our current funding. And I don't, hopes and prayers that the government will come through with some kind of different aid package is not a strategy. So that's one concern of mine, that we need something. And I recognize from last week's study session, maybe not covering all of transit costs, but at least ensuring that we have sufficient funds to handle what we have, and ideally at least reinstate the route to Three Springs Mercy, but also to address the changing transportation nature, whether that's electric conversion of our fleet, more electric charging stations. We know we're always going to need to provide public transit so that the people who rely on it most have it. And then, we've been talking about workforce housing. We brought this up as a consideration for some of this tax. And we brought it up again today, and the comment last couple of sessions was, well, it's not enough. But if you take the 2.25, that's the remainder from the amount that the 45% roughly, and if you dedicated it for transit and workforce housing, I think the public would see the benefit of that. They'd say, this is something that we all can rally around and we can support. And let me also say, I appreciate the work of the creative district and the creative economy. And I've served on the creative economy and was there at the early stages. But I believe that we have a responsibility to fund basic services first. And that in a Maslow hierarchy, transportation, housing, to me, is much basic and more essential than looking at the arts. And I'll also remind folks that, there are other venues or possibilities that the arts organizations and others could pursue. But I believe that 2.25 of this 5.25 tax dedicated to two purposes, workforce housing and transit, would support so many people in our community and is, in my mind, the highest return for this investment.
Thank you, Councilor Noseworthy. I might just ask a procedural question of the city attorney in terms of the amounts, the proposed change that's been suggested is adverse to the previous motion that was approved by council in another meeting. Is it appropriate at this time to entertain such a request of a councilor? I'm open to that if necessary.
Well, actually, as I pointed out earlier, setting the ballot language is actually part of the resolution, which is on the agenda later. Certainly inappropriate to discuss it at this point. The motion was phrased at the last meeting to draft a resolution consistent with the language that was in your motion. I think the intent of that was to make sure that the language that was brought to you reflects what the council anticipates seeing. So I think the vote on the resolution, again, is the item that will actually set the ballot language for the ballot question. This is an ordinance that would be adopted to support the collection of the tax. I know that seems kind of esoteric, but I think that really and truly the vote that's going to, this vote, assuming you take the action recommended, would be to have me draft a final ordinance to come back for first reading. That becomes moot if you don't approve the resolution later. But this action doesn't set the ballot language. That action will happen during the resolution. This on the agenda a little further down.
And that would be administrative item 12.1.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for that clarification. And perhaps Councilor Noseworthy, we can defer that request of the percentage changes in the actual language till item 12.1, if that's what I'm hearing correctly. Whereas this is just a measure of whether we should actually put it on the ballot. In which case I would entertain a motion for that specific purpose.
Can I ask a point of order here, though?
Sure.
So this is confusing to me because it seems like you need to know what the resolution is before you know if you want to put it on the ballot. So I think we have the two backwards.
Yeah, and that's just a vagary of how it got on the agenda. I think what would happen is if the ballot language were changed, then of course the presumption would be, that the ordinance would have to be changed to reflect that. But you're right, it is a little bit of cart before the horse here.
Can we just switch them now and
if you want to do that, you can switch them and defer a vote on this. I don't know that there's anything on the agenda between the two items. I'd have to go back and look at the agenda.
No, there isn't.
Yeah, if you would prefer to do it that way, I see no problem with that. You could table this one, take up the other one, and come back to this one. That would be fine.
Very good. So to table this discussion would require a vote to just to set this aside and move on to item 12.1.
After the vote on the resolution.
So if I make a motion to table this and move to the next one and then come back and we get a second, is that what we need to do? Okay, so
that would work, yes. You're deferring action on this with the assumption that you will take it up again later in the meeting. And again,
I'll second it.
So the motion was to defer this till further action, till discussion on 12.1, and then return to this particular item, which is 9.1. All right, it's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
yes.
Councilor Bateen?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes. And with that, we will move on for consideration of administrative item 12.1, discussion and possible action concerning a resolution submitting to the registered electors of the city at the city's general election to be held on April 6th, 2021, a ballot issue entitled concerning an increase in the city's lodger's tax. So we'll open with the staff report. I might say as administrative items, they do not require public hearing, and there will be no public discussion regarding these particular points. But I don't know who wants to kick us off, either Jose or Dirk.
I'll take a stab again. I think this one intro can be pretty brief. This item again follows the motion that council made at its last special meeting to amend the language consistent with the language that's in the current resolution that's before you, which raises the lodger's tax from 2% to 5.25. For the purposes specified that I read earlier, I can reread those if you would like, Mr. Mayor. Again, the estimate of the amount to be collected during 2021, the 7 months of collections will be an amount not to be, the estimate is it wouldn't be increased by more than $900,000. So again, the action on this resolution, which would be resolution R 2021-3, the effect of this resolution would be to approve putting this ballot question on the April 6th ballot. It's imperative that we do this, if not tonight, within the next day or two, because we have to set this language 60 days prior to the election, and we're bumping up against that. So it is important that we take action soon on this. Again, we have been moving this along quickly, but we are coming up against some election deadlines.
Thank you, Dirk. And with that, I might just, I don't think we need to you need to reread the entire thing. I think the salient points that are potential topics of discussion are the percentages and their stated purposes, which is 55% for sustainable tourism, 20% for transportation, 14% for arts and culture, and 11% for any of the above purposes or other purposes related to the impacts of tourism as council may determine. So with that, I'd entertain any other comments from council related to the actual language of the resolution proposed by our city attorney after previous debate and voting in special meeting last week. So with that, any other discussion, including Councilor Noseworthy? If you want to restate your thoughts, that would be great.
Just my thought is that 45% of the fund would be dedicated toward the purpose of transportation, transit transportation, and workforce housing. It would allow us to address the deficit that's quickly approaching, and would allow us to provide sustainability to our transit system, recognizing that it will be changing, because this is, unless we change it differently, this is a fund in perpetuity. So it gives us that. It also gives us the ability to start addressing workforce housing issues. Between that sum is well over $1 million, $1.2 million or something like that. It's a significant sum. It would allow future councils the flexibility to move between the two critical issues. If we had great funding for transportation in several years, you could put more emphasis on housing. If there was an opportunity, you could move back and forth. So it doesn't tie our hands, but gives us the ability to address what we have all identified as important public goods that are not funded.
Thank you. And if I can ask, were you intending to formulate that into a motion? And if so, how would you describe the other, all the other events that would be funded with this tax?
I would say the other 55% could be used to, as defined, let me find the language here, for marketing, including advertising, attracting conferences, conventions, and meetings. I would also say that within that, the arts organizations that help promote tourism and with that could also qualify for funding within that if necessary. So I think that there's a way to make certain that we're promoting marketing, conferences, conventions, meetings, events, festivals, things like that, anything that an art organization might be doing. And then also use this funding for public goods. I mean, there's nothing that says these dollars have to be tied to tourism. It's an opportunity for us to address funds that need to be taken care of, that the general fund usually needs to cover. So my request was that perhaps we could consider this one more time. And if there's any other discussion on that.
Just one quick change. I think sustainable marketing is one of our key pillars here. Okay.
Right.
Yes, didn't I say that?
No, you didn't use the word sustainable.
Oh, sustainable. Sorry, I was just scanning the document, but sustainable.
Well, and I appreciate your. We'll ask if we should formulate a motion in a moment. First, I have just one of Robert's Rules of Order. Given the fact that this was the same measure was proposed and failed for lack of a second in a previous meeting, is there obligation to, can this be restated? City Attorney, I'm looking at asking for thoughts on if it's reformulated.
It's a different motion.
I would agree. The question here is, you have a resolution is drafted before you. The motion that was proposed in the agenda doc is to, approve the resolution. And again, I hope that I captured the language that council wanted to see from the previous motion, but this is a new question. I think the other one was to draft the resolution to bring it to you. This one is the question of approving the actual resolution with the final language.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that clarification. That answers a few questions. And so with that, is there a motion in this regard? I'd entertain a motion.
is this an opportunity to change this resolution that you're inviting me to present a motion that changes this, or are you asking for a motion to approve what's been presented?
Whatever you
Sure.
wish.
Thank you.
I assume it's a change.
It is a change. I will make a motion to revise this language to reflect 55% for sustainable tourism marketing, including advertising and attracting conferences, conventions, meetings, and other events that promote tourism within the city. And 45% would be used to support transit and workforce housing.
There's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second before we have further discussion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I just wanted to say, to me, the salient point of this is there's no dedicated funds for arts and culture. I think that's a huge mistake. And I think the support that we've heard from virtually everybody tonight was in support of a dedicated fund for arts and culture as a salient factor of this entire effort. I think that would be remiss of us not to consider that. And I think that there is, we have arrived at such a compromise that's, I think, unprecedented in our community amongst all these diverse and nonprofits and for-profit folks, and there's something in this for everybody. And so I think to change the language in my mind right now would be not in the best public spirit, nor in support of all the work that's gone into this. So with that, that's my statement. Any others that would like to weigh in on this at this point before you call the action? Mayor Pro Tem Baxter.
Yes, I wanted to say that my second is based upon the concept that I think that funding for our housing and for transportation is a very, very important concept. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about that a little bit and heard it, because we did have several people tonight who did public comment who were of this mind, that they wanted to see it go to transportation rather than cultural events. So, or maybe less tourism and more toward our community members. So I just wanted to bring out that there are members of our community who feel that way. And I personally, I'm transportation and housing. I mean, that's who I am in this world these days, and good paying jobs. So I wanted to acknowledge Barbara's suggestion. And I realize it may not be the majority, but I wanted to at least acknowledge it and give us a chance to have a conversation about it.
Absolutely, thank you. And I did note that Ellen Stein was in support of additional transit funds, and Harrison Wendt is, from my notes this evening, spoke in favor of some other distribution of funds. So any other comments from council? Councilor Bettine.
Yeah, I would just note that this is the 11th hour of this process. It's certainly not the first time we've had this conversation. It's a little surprising to have such a large modification in the face of all the stakeholders and groups that have sort of tirelessly labored on this project outside of council. So, obviously I'm not going to be in support of this motion. I hope it doesn't pass. I think it throws the baby out with the bathwater, as they say.
And I would just add my support actually for the Arts and Cultural Fund. I just want to suggest that, tourism, in Durango cannot achieve economic sustainability without allowing us to focus on diversification and facilitating all the steps that we can do to help us get to a diversified state. And of the 14% that is slated to go to a cultural fund, a portion of that is, we've talked about being directed to the recently established Durango Creative District. And funding for this Durango Creative District, I would suggest, is an important step towards diversification and revitalization of our economy, especially since we're now positioned to qualify for these designated creative district funding from the states. And that's important because some of the projects that the state has funded through these designated creative districts are projects that include downtown revitalization projects, renovations of historic buildings, promotion of arts and cultural events and activities, of course, but also infrastructure to support workforce housing space and mixed-use development. And for the community's information, Ridgeway is a prime example of someone who is benefiting greatly from a sustainable creative district with a focus on this in their community. And they have recently been a beneficiary of over $11 million, or approximately $11 million, I believe, to renovate their downtown. And they're now positioned to receive funding from Space to Create Colorado, which is a collaborative effort of multiple organizations to provide affordable workforce housing and working spaces for creative sector entrepreneurs and artists. They're looking at closing on construction funding in this first quarter of 2021, and they're looking at building a unit or a development that will include 30 rental units, mostly 1 bedroom and some 2 bedroom, first floor spaces that will allow for a variety of community uses. And I just bring this up because it shows that these creative districts can become hubs of economic activity, and they bring vitality and uniqueness and identity to an organization or to a community. And I think we're overlooking an opportunity here that is substantial, and a substantial opportunity to diversify our economy and to focus on in an area that we have not been able to tap into yet. Not only that, but the funding of this cultural fund will also, as Jeff Souser said from the Powerhouse Science Center, it funds organizations. It helps them to create sustainability. It's real jobs. It's work. It's employment in our community. And lastly, I think that public art, I don't underestimate at all. A portion of this will go to fund some public art in a community, which brings tremendous value and, again, uniqueness and identity for our town. So I just want to say that I am very much in support of supporting the Arts and Cultural Fund. I also believe that it's extremely important to fund transportation, and with the funding that we have currently designated at 20% in the ballot language, as we created it at the last meeting, we're sustaining our transportation at our current levels, and which gives us the opportunity to continue to look for alternative forms of funding from alternative sources, just like we have done this year through our CARES Act funding to do the transportation route back to Mercy for the year. And so there's alternative options to continue to look at alternative sources of fundings as we continue to watch transportation evolve in the next several years. And in support of the lodgers, or the sustainable marketing that we're terming it, I think at this point in the game, I would agree with Councilor Bettine, it's very difficult to go back on as far as we've come. And I do believe that the sustainable marketing will help us. The goal of this funding is to help us promote tourism in off-season cycles. That's the entire goal of this. And as we have been discussed or informed through Visit Durango, they have suggested through their studies that every $1 invested in tourism generates $28 in broader economic impact. So the point is that the entire economy suffers when Durango is slow in off seasons. So we need to do what we can to kind of balance that out and moderate that fluctuation. So I would just wanted to add those points and suggest that I'm in favor of staying where we were and changing it this late state of the game. I think would be a huge mistake for Durango.
Mayor, may I interject just for a minute? I don't know if you saw my hand up. A couple of things. First of all, I think that the previous council knew about the shortfall in 2018 And I'm not certain why the bell or the drums haven't been ringing that we're hitting a cliff. But even if it's considered an 11th hour, it's still an opportunity to address what we need. As Jose learned last week, Thursday, there's an approaching cliff. So, I mean, it is an 11th hour for some folks and that's not any fault of Jose's. I'm just saying that, we're going through the budgeting and the forecasting. So I think that the 11th hour is the issue of, now that we have all this information, what's the right thing to do? And I will say that as Jose presented to us and from Cynthia, we would need, of the 5.25, we would need 1.5 dedicated just for transit to cover what we have now. That does not include adding a Mercy permanently back in. So what we've proposed is 1.05. We need 1.5 of that 5.25 just for transit. So I recognize, we've been going around on this. And I would also say that, the community came together, and I pointed this out at a previous meeting. The partner that didn't get mentioned was the city. And maybe we should have been more aggressive in talking about our basic needs for this tax. Maybe we should have been more assertive in explaining that we're reaching a critical junction with transportation and talking about the value of workforce housing, even though it was presented to us that that's not what you do with a lodging tax. So I recognize we as a council could have also maybe been more assertive or with staff support, more assertive in making certain the community was aware of what we're facing and what the trade-offs are. And, and it does come to a trade-off. Right now, I don't see necessarily any security for keeping that Three Springs Mercy transportation line going after the CARES money runs out in December of 2021. Mm-hmm. So let me just finish. If I may just finish,
please. I'd like to.
Yeah, I'm just saying that yes, you can call it the 11th hour, but it's still an opportunity to think about, is this the right movement? And finally, I also value the what could be with a creative district and what others have done. I think that setting something up in perpetuity to fund these kind of activities ties to the hands of too many future councils.
Well, so that we don't end up at the 11th hour, I'd ask for a roll call, please. Ms. Phillips.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter.
You're muted.
No.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Yes.
Councilor Bettine. No. Councilor Youssef.
Nope.
And Mayor Brookie.
No. Motion fails. May I entertain another motion?
What is the motion, Dirk, to pass this, please? You're muted. Dirk, you're on mute.
Can't get my cursor. I have two screens and I'm on the wrong cursor. The motion would be to approve resolution number 2021-3, a resolution submitting to the registered electors of the city at the city election to be held on April 6, 2021, a ballot issue and a title concerning an increase in the city's lodgers tax.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please? Or any further discussion, I might say, on this before we move forward. Okay, roll call, please.
Councilor Youssef.
Yes.
Councilor Bettine. Yes. Councilor Noseworthy.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter.
Yes.
Mayor Brookie.
Yes. Motion passes, and we will move back to item 9.1.1, which is public hearing on ordinance of the City of Durango, Colorado, amending Article 4 of the Chapter 23 of the Code of Ordinances regarding the imposition, collection, and administration of the lodger's tax and declaring an effective date. As you might remember moments ago, we did defer this item till we had resolution on the resolution 12.1. We now have that, so we are returning to this particular item, and I might just remind council of the recommended action. It is the recommendation of the city manager and the city attorney that the city council conduct a public hearing on the proposed ordinance of the City of Durango, Colorado, amending Article 4 of Chapter 23 of the Code of Ordinances regarding the imposition, collection, and administration of the lodger's tax, and thereafter by motion direct the city attorney to prepare a final draft of an ordinance for first reading at the next regular meeting of Durango City Council, which would be February 16th. So I'd entertain any further discussion or a motion in that regard.
So moved.
Second.
I moved. Just stated is.
Very good, Chris. It's been moved and seconded by Councilor Youssef. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes, thank you so much. And I just really am excited to have this move forward. The diversity of groups that supported it this evening, as well as the past year, and the stated excitement tonight in the testimony about the funds, not only the funds, but what that represents to their groups and how it will enhance the quality of life in Durango is pretty exciting. And look forward to this measure being on the ballot and the support of our community to make this a reality for continued funding, and a great source of funding. It's the only tax we as residents don't have to pay. So with that, we move forward to item 12.2, discussion and possible action concerning a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation in the amount of $953,446 to the 2021 Streets Capital Improvements Program. May we have a staff report to summarize this? I see Levi Lloyd teed up. Levi, take it away, or Jose, if you're prepared to start.
We'll pass it off to Levi Lloyd, our City Operations Director.
Thank you, Jose.
Good evening, members of council. This special appropriation is in response to comments from council seeking to add projects to the 2021 Streets Capital Improvements projects. The fund balance in the 2019 sales tax was noted to be $1.3 million. We have identified additional projects, additions to existing projects and one new project that would spend down that existing fund balance by $953,446. And that brings the fund balance in the 2019 streets tax to $352,055. We would be adding several new ADA ramps in several locations throughout the city. We're adding just under $500,000 in street overlays. There's 3 additional streets added to the previously approved projects: Elm Place, O'Brien Drive, and Aspen Place, and then adding expanding the scope of Rim Drive. Street reconstructions would be increased by $345,000. It adds 1 additional street, Kennebec Court, to be reconstructed, and then increases the scope of Columbine Drive. Columbine Drive is a joint multimodal and streets project. In 2020, we did all of the concrete, sidewalk, and curb and gutter work. This year, we would be going in and repaving that street. There are several utilities that need to be lowered, and we need to change the grade on this The crown on the road is extremely steep, so we're going to have to lower that and import some new road base. So it expands the scope of that project. This adds, we had one alley project approved in the 2021 budget. This adds a second alley, the Walgreens Alley. This is in the 2800 block and adds some right-of-way acquisition. If you're not familiar with this alley, there is basically directly in the middle of this, there is a section of alley right-of-way where the city only owns 5 feet of the alley. The rest is privately held. We've been in negotiations with the property owner about acquiring that right-of-way so that we can expand, make it easier to plow that, open it up for trash trucks, and then also repave that. This is a route, this is a bike route and also a route to Miller Middle School and Mountain Middle School. So it adds that alley to our alley improvements and then adds $34,000 in surface treatments. It adds Mullis Drive, Coal Bank, and Prospector, and then increases the scope of work that was approved for Florida Road. The additional project that is added is North College improvements design. And this is in response to Atmos Energy is doing the SSIR project where they are replacing all of their hazard gas lines around town. We have estimated that we are going to be catching up with them in probably 2022 or 2023. So what we'd like to do is design improvements from Florida Road up North College. The first phase would end basically at the last house on North College. This would be sidewalk, curb and gutter, detached sidewalk, curb and gutter, and then repaving of that section of road slated for either 2022 or 2023 with those with the 2019 sales tax. Again, this is in response to comments we received during the budgeting process. This was taken to the Infrastructure Advisory Board at last night's meeting, and the Infrastructure Advisory Board recommended approval by City Council of a vote of 3-0. Are there any questions?
Thank you for that presentation. Yeah, any councilors have questions, or I think we've, Councilor Noseworthy.
Levi, first of all, thank you. And thank you for the spelling out the clarification of what exactly is going to be done. We've had back and forth a fair amount of discussion around alleys. And you've talked about how they're big and it's kind of maybe not necessarily the same return on investment, but still the community has a desire and in some cases expectation that we will begin to address the alleys. And I know you've added an alley, but these are more modest improvements, not the kind of issues that we're seeing with some of the flooding that's taking place. So when can we actually start? When do you anticipate addressing alleys, at what level? And how will the public be aware of the prioritization of that?
So our plan is to, we are finishing evaluating the remaining unpaved alleys in the city of Durango. We will be putting together budget information, any storm sewer improvements that need to be addressed, utilities conflicts. As you may or may not be aware, typically in alleys is where sanitary sewer flows. And that is a gravity fed. So there are a lot of conflicts in the alleys that would have to be addressed. So we want to look at, number one, if it's feasible to do storm sewer improvements. And the big issue is that the remaining, I believe it's about 13 alleys around the city of Durango. Some of those don't have adequate drainage from one end to the other. So you can't surface drain those. And if there are utility conflicts, particularly sanitary sewer, there's not a great way to put in storm sewer. So we are finishing an evaluation of those alleys. And then in 2022, with our 5-year update to our asphalt condition assessment, we will be asking the company that does that to evaluate the alleys in the city of Durango, both the paved and the non-paved alleys. So by March, we hope to have the evaluation done in some preliminary budget numbers and feasibility of those remaining alleys. We will take that to the Infrastructure Advisory Board, and then we can certainly bring that to Council for consideration. And then again in 2022, we will have the existing paved alleys evaluated, and then also the unpaved alleys, and that will help inform our decisions moving forward. So we will be addressing alleys as we move forward. Some of the alleys that we'll be addressing will be commercial alleys that are currently paved but are in very, very bad shape. That is contributing to flooding, significant potholes, damage to vehicles, and things of that nature. So we'll start working on some of those. And then we'll also be looking at the unpaved alleys around town and which ones are feasible to be paved.
Thank you, Levi. Appreciate that. And if there's any other questions, great. If not, I'd entertain a motion on the amount and purpose as stated for this additional appropriation at this time.
I'd make a motion that we authorize an additional appropriation in the amount of $953,446 to the 2021 Streets Capital Improvements Program.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, maybe we have a roll call, please. Ms. Phillips.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes, thank you so much. We'll move on to 12.3, which is a discussion on possible action concerning a resolution supporting the proposed use of appropriated joint sales tax funding in support of a one-year contract with Manna Soup Kitchen to implement a navigation center for unhoused individuals. Can we have a staff report? I see Kevin Hall, unless city manager would like to open up the discussion.
Yes, just to introduce Kevin Hall, Assistant City Manager and Community Development Director, to do the honors of presenting this item. This was something that we had discussed at our study session last week, so it is fresh in the council's mind, but it is a project to move forward and recommend to use joint sales tax funding on. Kevin?
Thank you, Jose. Good evening, councilors. As you know, we talked at last week's study session regarding implementation on the homeless strategic plan that was adopted last February. With COVID, there was a bit of a lag in some of the work of the interim working group that was really an offshoot of the committee that developed the plan. That work continued through the summer. Ultimately, in the fall, with the help of Jen Lopez of Moxie Group, her pro bono consulting essentially guided an RFP process that was in alignment with the recommendations of the adopted plan. The RFP process was to solicit interest in a navigation center and a data collection center as a combined effort. The group received only one proposal. However, that proposal was reviewed by the committee, and there was unanimity that the proposal met the intent of the plan. The committee included not only Jen Lopez, but myself for the city, Chuck Stevens for the county, and a variety of the nonprofits that serve the homeless community and others in the city of Durango and surrounding areas. So the proposal came in. As you know, we forwarded that proposal on to you on January the 7th. The proposal is includes a full budget that was included in your packet. The total project for 1 year is approximately $295,000. Manna is asking for $80,000 of joint sales tax funds to supplement the $295,000 for this year. I think the proposal offered a pretty thorough look at what they intend to do with the dollars, and where we're at right now is after last week's conversation with council, you asked us to bring back a resolution, and the resolution would be to consider supporting the proposal as provided. And that resolution will go to La Plata County, who, as you know, administers the joint sales tax dollars. You will recall towards the end of last year, in working with La Plata County, there was $100,000 budgeted for homeless initiatives, which could include implementation of this plan. I would say that what's before you tonight is really exciting news. I mean, I'm not being particularly enthusiastic here. However, I will say that if you look at the plan that was adopted in February, this was two of the very first things that needed to happen, along with trying to find a interim camp solution, which that is a kind of a separate initiative. But where we're at right now is the plan really was looking for the community to step forward and take ownership on some of the homelessness issues with the support of the county and the city. So the city and county both adopted the plan, budgeted some funds. Now we're in a position where there's an ask to use some of these funds for this first year. Obviously, I think it's MANA's intent to continue into years into the future. Now, we're only talking about year one here, but the proposal is outlines how they're going to use those dollars. I will say that in order to move forward, not only would we need a resolution, but then there would be discussion with MANA and La Plata County specifically of what the contract looks like, how payments would be made so that there's accountability of the use of funds. And those conversations have not occurred yet. The purpose of the resolution would be just to notify the Board of County Commissioners officially that there is support, if indeed council chooses to do that. There is support for use of those dollars in 2021 for the purposes of supporting the navigation center. The other component to this is the coordinating council that would come, that MANA is suggesting they would support the creation of. That was also a primary function of the implementation of the plan. So it appears that MANA is putting forth a pretty encompassing proposal. The one item that's not in here that we may have talked about 6 months ago was the idea of somebody who is managing from a very topical level the homeless issues throughout the community. This is really about MANA serving to provide, I think the navigation center term is a good one, because if there's services needed for individuals that are unhoused or struggling with housing, they can come to MANA and talk through what issues, what services they need. There would be the function of the employment navigation as well. So there's a broad range of things here. As you will recall, MANA has really shifted their strategic plan to be more encompassing than a soup kitchen, which I think over the years they have been doing a lot more than just being a soup kitchen. But the idea of in-person dining with COVID, I think there was a rethink on all of that with the adoption of the plan, a rethink. I know that Ann Morris and her board spent a lot of time talking with the community, seeing how they might be able to make this work for their organization. It seems like a good fit. They're supportive of moving in this direction. One item I did want to call out is you saw an email, I want to say it was in the past week, and then a follow-up today regarding a suggestion of not doing a navigation center at the MANA site, but possibly at the Denier site. What I would tell you to that is Anne and her folks up at MANA have been speaking with this individual and made it clear that the navigation center works at the MANA site. It would not necessarily work at the Denier site. The Denier site is very much yet up for discussion with La Plata County. As you know, that property was transferred back to them. It is a resource that's available to them. They will be going into their own process in terms of how that might be used moving into 2021. And but MANA was pretty clear that the navigation center proposal as it's prepared really relates to doing so within the interior of their own facility. As you know, that facility is on city property on the social services campus. You know, in terms of process moving forward, if there's interest in supporting this, we would get the resolution squared away. We'll get that to La Plata County. La Plata County is already having, in talking with the county manager, he's already had some preliminary discussions with the county commissioners. He and I spoke to process. He was comfortable with the process we're going through here with you, the city council. We would get him that resolution of support. I know they are talking about the Denier Center on February the 9th, but I believe they're also going to be talking about this matter as well. So if there's support here, if there's support at the county, then staff will need to work with MANA. The county staff as well as city will work with MANA to identify what that contract would look like for that first year. I think we should very much anticipate that there would be an ask going into 2022 budgeting process. However, that conversation hasn't begun yet. The proposal that MANA has put forward, we're tracking pretty closely with where we're at. We're a couple of weeks off from what they had put in their proposal, but they were really looking for the contract of funding to really be squared away in early March. So we're positioned pretty well right now to make that happen, so if there is support for doing so. And I do know that, and I communicated with Ann Morris earlier in the week, she said she would be available for questions if you had them for her. She's at the meeting. She'd need to be invited in. Typically during administrative items, we don't bring in other folks, but certainly that's an opportunity if you wanted to do that. With that, I guess what I'm asking and support of staff is to get that resolution squared away and approved, and we get that over to county so we can keep moving this process forward.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. And I might just to summarize the recommended action, which is to approve the attached resolution supporting the proposed use of the appropriated joint sales tax funding in support of a one-year contract with MANA Soup Kitchen to implement a navigation center for unhoused individuals. It's pretty basic, and it's not a commitment. It's just simply, as Kevin, I hope, articulated, that it's a resolution in support of the proposed use, so that we can begin our conversations with the county and move forward with this concept with further discussion. It's not a commitment to for funding at this juncture. Is that if I'm understanding it right?
Well, I'll clarify that a little bit. The money for homelessness issues was budgeted in 2021 in the joint sales tax fund. So really what this is a clarification of interest in using those dollars for the purpose of supporting the MANA proposal. So, in a sense, it very much is a commitment that the city wants to make. The county commissioners will have to do the same thing. And at that point, then there is no funding until the contract gets worked through. However, I don't see any big roadblocks in making that come together. I think the intent here would be very much that if the city council is interested in doing so, that is, you would be expressing support for spending $80,000 of the $100,000 from the 2021 joint sales tax budget on this purpose.
Thank you, Kevin. And again, thank you so much for that clarification. No new dollars. This is money that was out of the joint sales tax that has been targeted for this purpose or a purpose of this nature in support of the homeless issue. So thanks for that. Any other discussion, or I'd entertain a motion?
I would make a motion, since I'm not hearing any discussion, to pass a resolution supporting the proposed use of appropriated joint sales tax funding in support of a one-year contract with MANA Soup Kitchen to implement a navigation center for unhoused individuals.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter?
Yes.
Councilor Bateen?
Yes.
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Brookie?
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks to those folks, particularly Ann Morris up at MANA and her board to bring this proposal before us. So thank you so much. And with that, we move on to item 12.4, which is the city manager update. And there's nobody else but Jose to take this one on for sure.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much. I do just have one item under our city manager update. It is a follow back through with the city council to give our first financial update as we move forward. So Cynthia Sneed, our finance director, will provide our first financial update moving forward, and we will make these more regular as we go through on monthly financial updates. So with that, I'll pass it to Cynthia.
Thank you, Jose. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Tonight, I am going to be taking a look at the current financial position of the city for your perusal and for that of the public. But first, I need to share my screen. And please let me know when you can see that.
Can see it.
Okay, great. So tonight, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the financial position of the city. And it is not, there we go. And so this financial health model illustrates how the overall financial health of the city has many factors affecting it. And as this model indicates, the foundation, the very underpinnings for financial health is the political and economic environment. This concept is especially important at this moment in time because of the current economic reality due to COVID, where the rug really has been pulled out from under so many of our economic drivers. So the model presents a metaphor of the three-legged stool, and that illustrates how when the financial position, budget practices, and liabilities are all balanced, the overall financial health is most secure and most able to withstand the financial pressures. So tonight's presentation is going to focus on just this one leg, which is the financial position and the related parameters. The financial position provides the starting point for our journey to improve financial health. Just like any journey, we're starting from the current circumstances will influence the choices that you make on how you get to your destination. So drilling down, in these four pieces are the critical factors that influence the financial position. We'll look at the current cash position and project that out into the future. We'll also look at the importance of reserves, and lastly, the revenues and expenditures. So our first factor is a cash position. I created a cash flow projection into the year 2023, and it's important to note the assumptions and the data used in preparing this cash flow projection. First of all, it's very high level, and it had to make some assumptions. The most important factor that's affecting this projection was using the year 2020 in the data, which we all know that 2020 is a year like no other and was entirely unexpected. The bad news is that using such a turbulent year as a basis for the future will negatively affect the projections. However, the good news is that using that 2020 data really illustrates how nimble or not the financial position is to the unexpected, and supports the notion that having a strong financial policy and reserves in place are key to financial health. So this model shows, it takes, the starting point for this model is the cash on hand at December 31st, 2020, at the beginning of this year. So the next step, then I looked at the inflows and the outflows of cash for the 2-year periods, which were 2019 and 2020. So we had the actual data of the inflows and outflows for those 2 years for the city as a whole, and it includes all funds. It's not specific to any one fund. Of course, 2020 had many challenges for both revenues and expenditures, and it throws a bit of a wrench into these trends. But based on the trends of the actual inflows and outflows for those 2 years, we applied that to the budget, the adopted budget for 2021, and projected out what that would look like for 2021 and for 2 years beyond. So you'll notice the lines across, the dotted line and the solid line at the bottom. That represents the inflows and the outflows for the expenses and the revenues. And they do track fairly close to each other. But however, there's clearly a larger use of the cash over time which is indicated by that gray block that declines and trending downwards. If that trend continues, the cash balance would certainly decline substantially by September of 2023. I want to reiterate that using the 2020 actuals and the 2021 budget rather than actuals for the future months does skew the graph a bit. But the takeaway is that while the city is in okay shape today, we need to keep an eye to the future needs and be watchful and monitor those inflows and outflows and how that will impact this chart going forward. I want to mention that a more detailed analysis is forthcoming, will be done in a similar manner, but for each fund individually as we move into the forecasting and the budget process. Okay, so the next major factor is reserves. The city has some work to do in this area, namely adopting key financial policies, including reserve policies and fund balance policies for the various funds. This effort has gained some traction, and staff is working with the SALT FAB advisory boards to dust off their draft of the general fund reserve recommendation and polish it up. And staff will bring these policies to council in the next couple of months for their consideration and will definitely be part of the 2022 budget prep and annually moving forward. So the next major factor is revenues. This analysis looked into the revenues in the aggregate for the city. A deeper dive to disaggregate them is needed, and the topics to consider are diversification and the stabilization of the revenues. Which ones are more sensitive to the downturn? Listed are some of the strategies to enhance revenues that will most certainly be part of those budget discussions. So I've broken down the governmental funds, broken up the revenues between the governmental funds and proprietary funds for this graph. Taxes, primarily sales taxes, are the largest revenue stream for the governmental funds. One disclaimer here is that the month of December 2020 has not yet closed the books, so these numbers could change a little bit, but I don't think it will be materially changed. The city did experience a decline in these revenues in 2020, which really was expected due to the COVID. So now we're going to take a closer look at tax revenues in the governmental funds. This also shows a decline for 2020 for the city sales tax and a little bit of more stability in the property taxes. It's no surprise with the effects of COVID on many of the businesses in the city. A deeper dive is warranted to determine what impact sales tax from online sales have had given the stay-at-home orders. So now we're going to look at the revenues for proprietary funds, which are the water, sewer, sustainable services, and transportation services. The intergovernmental revenues include federal grants for the transit and for the airport. And charges for services includes the water, sewer, solid waste, and recycling fees, as well as transit fees, parking meter revenue, airport parking lot, and concession fees. We note a decline in revenues for 2020 here as well, likely from reduced passengers at the airport. And as stated earlier, a deeper dive into the revenues and expenses for each fund will assist in determining a more specific course of action on the declining revenues. So now we're going to move on to the expenditure side of the equation. The most basic step in the evaluating of expenditures is to answer questions like, which areas of the expenditures are biggest? Which ones are growing the fastest? The answers suggest where we should focus cost control strategies. Personnel is one of the largest areas of expenditures, and there are some strategies to reduce spending there. Position control is important because employees are expensive and personnel costs are not easy to change after the positions have been filled. So the next two slides are all about where is the money going. Similar to revenues, expenditures are separated into governmental funds and proprietary funds. Another item to note is expenditures for 2020 are not included in these graphs. The accounting books are still open for December, and since December is year end, there'll be many more entries to be made, and I don't want to provide an incomplete picture. The takeaway from this slide is to determine what categories can provide the greatest opportunities for savings. The charges and services should be examined for programs and services the city provides and consider such things as, are they mandated? Do they tie to the strategic plan and the council goals? Is there an increasing or decreasing demand for those services? Or could we provide a different level of service? The proprietary expenditures are different in that the objective is to have the revenues cover expenses, but it does help from a financial management standpoint to understand where the expenses are coming from so that user rates can be appropriately set. So this slide sums up my assessment of where the city is on these factors. I've used the traffic light indicator of red, yellow, and green. In this case, all are yellow. The first being cash position. The city is good for the moment, but we really need a watchful eye to monitor and implement cost savings and potential revenue enhancements as required in the near future. Number 2 is reserves. Meaningful reserve policies are on the radar and they are in process. Once we get there, this indicator would change to green. The third is revenues. This is yellow, pending a deeper dive into revenues to encourage diversification and stabilization by determining those that are more sensitive to a downturn, as well as better forecasting models. And lastly is expenditures. Similar to revenues, gaining control of or reducing expenditures will require additional evaluation, including an inventory of the programs offered. The good news is that the city is not in the red. However, there is work to be done to improve the financial position to get to green. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sneed. Yeah, any additional thoughts or questions for our new finance director? Seeing none, any additional thoughts, Jose, that you'd like to wrap up your city manager update with?
Just want to say thank you for Cynthia for going through this process and doing the financial assessment. Definitely have some things to kind of finish up and finalize. We have a lot of big projects that we were talking about in the strategic plan retreat that finance is going to be undertaking and doing. And we'll be sure to continue to move forward and getting some more forecasting and analysis for the city council as we move forward. And that concludes my update for the evening.
I was just gonna, I'm sorry, I should have been quicker to the draw. I just wanted to thank Cynthia too, and also thank her for her efforts on working with our strategy and long-term finance committee in this regard. I feel like we're moving in a great direction. That was a very informative report, and I liked the displays that were very telling and presented a good picture. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thanks again. And with that, we'll move on to item 13, council reports and actions, where each member of council is provided an opportunity to report on meetings recently attended or discuss topics not otherwise appearing on the agenda. So I'll start with whoever wants to start first, perhaps Mayor Pro Tem Baxter. Not to put you on the spot, we can rotate back to you.
Thank you. Well, it's because you knew I had an item. That was why you called on me.
Well, I didn't know that for certain, but I suspected. That's for
So
CAS, the Colorado Association of Ski Towns, has sent out a letter about the fact that there would be multimodal and transit funding and possibly in a future funding package. And I had wondered if this was something that staff felt we should be doing. And I think Jose had wondered if council thought it was something we should be doing. And so if we thought it was something we should do, then staff would do it and try to get more funding for our transportation and our multimodal programs.
Absolutely. Just staff is in favor of sending the letter if the council is agreeable and there's no objections.
So I think perhaps we can just do a little roundup of folks that that are familiar, if you're not familiar and didn't see that memorandum from CAST, it would be in support of a state legislation that would enhance funding for transportation for communities such as ours. Nothing specific, just lobbying and putting CAST voice behind that. And so I would totally be in favor of that and be able to sign a letter if staff would prepare it if council is in agreement. So yeah, any thoughts or any negatives regarding that issue? Seeing none, I think if we could create the letter, Jose, and then we can distribute to council, and I'd be happy to sign it before with any amendments that any councilor would like to see on it before it goes out.
Sounds good. Sarah is already on top of it and had a draft letter ready to go, so I will forward it out to the council this evening for you to comment and have any modifications.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. And with that, I might just follow up with reports and actions of my own. Last Thursday and Friday, Colorado Association of Ski Towns, CAST, did have our spring or winter conference virtually. And as many of you know, I have been for 2.5 years president of CAST, but in recognition that I'm term limited as a city councilor, I was not able to rerun for another term as president. So I stepped down and passed the gavel. We had an election amongst all CAST community members, which is all the ski towns in Colorado and a number of others around the country. Mayor Sarah Smith Hines, the mayor of Avon, was elected to the board. And amongst the board, they elected city manager from Crested Butte, Dara McDonald, as president, the new president of CAST, which to replace me. So I was happy to pass the gavel last Thursday. And I know we had Jose Madrigal was in attendance. I was able to introduce him to our CAST crew. And the topics, more importantly, the topics that were discussed over the next few hours by CAST was a number of speakers regarding workforce housing, specifically the planning department from Whistler, BC, which has a unique method of acquiring workforce housing in their community and mandating it in every development, and also the town of Frisco, which represented a number of the housing options available in Summit County. That's the Breckenridge, Dillon area, and what they do in terms of deed restrictions on developers to guarantee that a certain amount of every development is deed restricted for affordable housing or attainable housing, as we say. So it was a very informative session, and great group. I've been honored to represent them and Durango in that group for a number of years now, and hope that somebody in our next council can take over and be participating in that effort as well. With that, I also received a call late this afternoon from the mayor of Cortez to ask a favor, and that was they are about to embark. He was panicked going into an executive session this evening in Cortez City Council to talk about hiring a search firm for a new city manager. I said, oh, well, thanks for that question. He just had a list of search firms that he was asking if we had worked with them. And one of them was, in fact, Slavin's that worked with us over the past few months and brought us Jose. So I said, yeah, we could highly recommend them. They were also interviewing a couple of the other firms that we also interviewed. And so it was just interesting to know that they're just now embarking on that process. And I reminded them that we got the last good city manager out of Slavin's, so they probably ought to pick somebody else. So with that, we look forward to the city of Cortez and we'll wish them well in their search for a new city manager. They can use that help. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Oh, okay. I thought you were passing for good. I was gonna say, I have something. Is it okay if I go next, or does someone else?
Absolutely. Go for it, Melissa.
A couple things. I wanted to give you guys an update on the Strategy and Long-Term Finance Committee, what we refer to as SALT FAB. Mayor Pro Tem Baxter attended the last meeting with me and also with Cynthia Sneed. Excuse me, my printer is going off on the background. You know how sometimes they just clean, and anyway, it's doing that. So I apologize for the noise. But anyway, Cynthia went through a great presentation and recommendation to the board about some agenda items going forward around policies, which we've discussed a couple times now. And Kim brought forward the idea that we would establish a working committee with herself and myself and Cynthia to kind of finalize this agenda for Salt Fab going forward for 2021. And once we will meet soon to go over that, and we will bring that back to council just to confirm. But I wanted to let you guys kind of know where we landed with that. I think that with Cynthia on board, we have a very good opportunity to engage the members in some real meaningful work around the reserves, policies, and best practices. So I think we're moving forward in the right direction. Does anyone have any questions on that before I move on? Okay, or Kim, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to agree with you that Cynthia did a great job, and the idea that the financial policies, as she said, we don't really have them. So this is a great opportunity to give some work to the Salt Fab. And what's interesting is she went through the slide presentation, and with all of her thoughts about the policies, it addressed exactly the items that we wanted to have the Salt Fab address as a council anyway. And it made a great dovetail for the whole conversation. So that was stupendous.
And we are going to have we do have another vacancy on the Salt Fab Committee, as well as several other advisory boards that when the new council is seated, I believe, we'll be looking at filling those vacancies. I hope the community will apply in earnest for those positions. Also, I wanted to get, on the table, Jose, that I would love to get an update on a couple things related to our businesses as soon as possible, if we can. Doesn't have to, certainly, obviously not tonight, but potentially at a city council study session or another following meeting, which is, an update on our bump out program and where we are with that, because it's now February. And I know that our businesses were trying to get that into place at the latest by mid-March. And so I was just curious, I'm wanting to stay on top of that and apprised of our developments in that area. I'm also interested in getting an update on our utility forgiveness program. If companies are taking advantage of that, and also what we're doing to market that, because I've been in touch with a few people that were not aware of this program, and I thought that they would be. And so I kind of wanted to see what we're doing to really get that word out.
It is, the utility program just got up and running. There's a lot of work we had to do on the back end to get the program set up, a lot of coordination and whatnot, but it is up and running. We are working with the communication department to get the word out more, but it just started just to make sure that we had it to where it be as seamless as possible when people applied in.
Great, thank you. And could you provide council just with talking points around that program and how we might also be able to help support that
Sure.
when we're in conversations with residents, businesses. And then to just one more issue around the business sector and business vitality and supporting businesses in the in this, as we work to get to a recovery point, is the question about liquor licenses. That was brought up with me by a current resident here recently, and I just wanted to kind of bring that back onto the table to see if at some point there's council appetite to have that discussion.
The only thing that I will throw out for consideration for the council, the liquor license is split, and a good majority, I believe it is 40 to 50% does go to fund our PD. So a reduction in that would require a pivot in our budget. Not saying that it can't be done, not saying that we wouldn't look into it, just saying that that is one of those areas that was a little bit more difficult for us to do than some of these other programs that we were able to offer, which we were able to do because they weren't so much in the operating expenditures that we were able to offset.
Thank you for clarifying that. So you're saying 40 to 50% goes to PD from those liquor, and was that established by a resolution, or how was that established?
We'll have to get more information with Amy on that one, where that was established, but that's where some of those fees go to help.
Clearly a very important function for our community. So I understand that. So thank you for clarifying that. Because someone was saying, what are you doing with that? And I know we had discussed it before. I think Councillor Bettine brought it up in the past. Just anything we can do to support our businesses, but in that case, that could be difficult. So thank you. And that's all I had.
Councilor Ellsworthy, sorry, I was on mute.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give a quick update on the Community Relations Commission had their retreat where they were coming up with their work plan. A couple of big items are translation. I sent a note out to council, but I also wanted the public to be aware. They've requested that we really address Spanish language at the bus and the transit stations and the transit center, but also looking at Spanish speaking monolingual. So that's only the language. How do we make certain that the police, the fire department, EMTs, that that they're able to actually communicate with people when those kind of emergencies arise. But even things like trails and park signs, making certain that we're inclusive of our community. The full plan is available actually on the media site for last week, but also looking at community oversight for law enforcement, as some other communities have done, and then working with 9R and FLC to bridge the relationship, particularly in issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Part of it will be that, and then they'll also be working to revise the draft resolution with Dirk's and Suzanne's support, really kind of looking at the original rationale for creating the Community Relations Commission and whether or not it should be more of along the lines of an advisory board with a staff liaison appointed, and increasing the number of participants to as many as 7, similar to the Parks and Rec and the multimodal boards. And maybe that also similar to the multimodal board, maybe having some designated representation. So that's was last week's meeting. We also discussed issues of contracts, big contracts that the city delivers to entities, making certain that those are welcoming, inclusive, appreciative of the diverse community that we have. And then last night, because Councilor Baxter was going to the Strategic and Long-Term Finance Committee, I went to the Infrastructure Advisory Board, excuse me, and a couple of things came out of that. The SEH first draft of the water treatment capabilities should be out February 15th. So I know we're all eagerly, let me sip this a second. We're all eagerly awaiting that draft. And then there is a plan for coming through with various recommendations of how to address our water treatment capabilities. We looked at the appropriation for the streets and discussed that. That was really helpful from Levi to get the clarification. But we also looked at the CIP plans for the fourth quarter 2020. And, there were several that had significant sums, 1.9 million in one case, and no progress. And I reminded that we probably need as a council to have those come back to us and have them be allocated back into the appropriate fund, the water or the sewer fund, whichever was the area, and then looking at it for a reappropriation later. So there were also others that said we were complete, but still had significant funds in the outstanding, the available funding. And that could be partially, we're still waiting for the year to close, but also it's a little bit of some of the cases were significant funds. And so I'd like to ask that council we were doing a quarterly study session on the CIPs. And I would like to, now that we have Cynthia on board, reinstate that so that we can look at them and ask questions of those that stand out for council. So that came out of the IAB meeting. And then the last one was I just had a morning Alliance board meeting, and also some issues there of working through the budget, which we feel will be have a sustainable budget for this coming year, and issues of working with the city in areas of housing, of the La Posta Road, and recruiting of entrepreneurs to the community. So that's my main report, those three.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilor Noseworthy. Councilor Bettine, any thoughts, council reports or actions on your front?
I'm going to pass this evening. Thank you.
I want to thank you for that, your initiative on the food for, maybe you can restate that for me, food for our healthcare workers program. That
Feed the front lines.
Feed the front lines. Thank you. You want to give a plug for that?
That's right. Oh yeah, I gave one last time. Happy to give it again. We're adding the folks. Some of them are on this panel that are out at the county vaccine site on Saturdays. So if you're getting a lunch for your volunteerism, we're adding you to our program, and we'll out until you're done. So the donation's still being accepted. We're about at 90% of our stated goal of $60,000, and so we expect to achieve that here soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Could I give an update on the vaccine effort just real quickly? Because I know both Melissa and I have been volunteering with that, but we were there on Saturday, and I don't have the official count, but I believe we were able to have close to 500 people vaccinated in 3.5 hours, which was impressive. For those of you that are trying to get an appointment, we never know exactly when the appointment letter will go out, that it's available. In part, that's determined when we know it, when San Juan Basin Public Health knows what kind of count we have for vaccines coming in. But I always encourage people to stay, to be looking sometime around Wednesday and Thursday for that appointment calendar to come out. If you're registered with San Juan Basin Public Health, you should be getting access through that. They do get taken within about an hour time period. So we're still focusing on 70-year-olds and above, and then also appropriate frontline workers. And then Dean, I believe that next week, February 8th, it'll go to 65-year-olds in the community.
Yeah.
And so, and school teachers and childcare workers. So I think it's a great shout out to all the people who make this happen. It's a huge effort, both the day of the event and all during the week, helping make it come together. So, and thank you for the food.
Yeah. Congratulations and thank you on all fronts for volunteerism and that $60,000 out of our community through that program you set up, Chris, is awesome. Thanks so much. So with that, I'm reminded that we are now entering our 9th hour of Zooms as a council. We started at 8:30 this morning. We went till 11:30. We regrouped at 1 and we went till close to 3. And then we started again at 6:30 for the benefit of the public. So I want to thank counselors for hanging in there and staff, and totally staff for hanging in there all day. And so hopefully tomorrow you can wake up and get some work done and implement everything we talked about. So I appreciate it. And thank you, counselors, for a heck of a long day, and look forward to next week as well. So thanks. And with that, I can adjourn this meeting.